All right, I think we should be live. Cool.
Sorry, I'm feel loud.
It's okay. So today we're going to talk about configuration management. Specifically, we're going to do some pretty simple stuff with Puppet. Kind of walk you through some things. So if you have access to the Vagrant VM environment, you might want to go ahead and get that VM started up. We won't get to it initially, but good to start now. So a little bit of review from last week. We use configuration management to manage clusters of machines. It helps with automation because we like to automate ourselves out of jobs, no matter if we're a dev or an op person. It makes everything centralized, so it's easy to know where everything is. It's standardized, blah blah blah, and it provides us, historical records of stuff. You can do verify permissions, configure files, a whole bunch of stuff. You can set up system-wide settings. You can do group settings. You can set things a whole bunch, and it makes it easier to troubleshoot when something happens. You can also spin something up, try something, blow it up, and bring it back up, and try to bring it back in that same state. We already went over this last week, but today we're going to talk about Puppet just to get you started. No preference. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install Puppet on there. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to start up my Vagrant VM. I'll have this slide up so you can, not that that command's that hard to remember. And let me know if I'm going too fast on any of this. And feel free to ask any questions. Yeah, sure.
So Puppet brings stuff up after you get to the point where you can install something. What kind of tools can you use to actually make a VM with its settings before you get to that point?
You mean like install the operating system?
Yeah.
So that's a topic we haven't really gotten into at all. And in the cloud world, we don't have to do as much. But depending on the operating system, there are some setup scripts to automate it. So in the Red Hat world, they have Kickstart. So you have a config file. And actually, I can show you. If you log in, you'll see if you log in as root, you'll see this Anaconda KS config. This is like the machine-generated config file. You wouldn't want to necessarily use it, but this is basically configuring all the various things about it, saying, here's what I did, here's the things I removed, here's the other scripts that I ran to do the thing. So the Kickstart, basically when it boots up, you can say, you can put this file up on the web anywhere, and you can say, go download it. And then as long as your networking is working, it'll download it, and then it doesn't ask you any questions if you do it right. It'll make all the file systems, it'll install everything. You can do scripts like what I do down here in this post part. I manually create the Vagrant user, I set the password, and then I remove some stuff that I don't want to make the image smaller, and then I set the repositories manually. So that's in the Red Hat world. In the Debian world, they have something similar. It's called Precede, and it works in a similar fashion. It's just a little more arcane to kind of understand, but it works in a very similar thing. Basically, you're answering all the questions that the installer would ask you, and that's a way of automating it. And so there's a lot of tools out there that kind of help with that whole thing, where it integrates in with your DNS. You can do net booting with Pixie Boot. So literally, the machine starts up. It tries to connect to the network, it gets DHCP, and then it asks for an image, and the image is grub or whatever, and then yeah. So you can really automate a lot of it, and there's a lot of tools out there. Like Puppet has a tool called Razor, which is a tool for that. So you basically can throw a whole bunch of machines in your infrastructure as long as your networking is set up. Razor is basically a really small version of Linux running. It boots up, and it waits to get called. And then when you say, tell Razor, hey, go provision this machine, it'll go through and it'll initiate the whole process for you. So there's a lot of tools out there. But in the cloud world, we generally don't deal with that as much because we deal with images that people have already made. So that's an entirely advanced topic that we hopefully we could get to next year. But yeah, it's an interesting topic. So install Puppet. So now I have Puppet installed. You can see that it has its version 3.6. We actually pulled it from the Puppet Labs repository, so this is the latest and greatest. So one thing to note about Puppet, and I kind of mentioned this last week, is that it's a declarative system. So we want to declare the system to be in a state that we want. We tell Puppet through a set of files how to do the work to match the description that we want to do. And we typically save all these descriptions and declarations in some type of repository, so we have some kind of record of what we're doing. So in the Puppet world, everything is a resource. So we could run puppet describe -l. And I recommend you run any of the Puppet commands as root. And this basically describes every single type of resource that Puppet knows how to manage. So for example, cron, up there towards the top. You can use Puppet in its own declarative language to put a cron entry in. So you can set up some kind of a scheduled thing. We have the package resource, which allows us to install a package. So we can say, do this package stuff. We also have files. We can, say, here's this file, go copy this in this repository. Or here's this template of a file, fill it in with these variables the way I want it. Or here's literally what I want you to put it inside of the config file, which we'll show here in a second. You can set groups. You can add groups. You can manage the services. So hey, I want to have SSH starting, or more like Apache starting. Or you can manage users as well. So for sanity's sake, let's just Puppet kind of has this nice little command line interface to let you query what it thinks the system is. You normally wouldn't use this in a production sense, but it's nice as a just kind of understanding first. So first we're going to do, we're going to look at the user resource for the Vagrant user. So we're going to say resource user Vagrant. And what it does is it literally outputs out what you could essentially copy and paste into a Puppet manifest file, in theory. I wouldn't do this in production for everything, but this just kind of shows you what it thinks its settings are in Puppet language. So we can, for example, take one of these settings and change it, and then run a Puppet manifest run, and it will change it if you wanted to. So in this case, it's saying that we want to make sure the user is present. The group ID is 500. It has an array for the groups that you want to have it in, and right now its other group is just wheel. It sets the password literally as the shadow file version of it, which you probably don't want to do in your Puppet manifest anyway, because it's not very secure, and some other various things you can do. So that's just a very, very, very simple example. And all of these resources have some type of attributes, and you can look all of this up online. I frequently look at the Puppet documentation site to learn about it. If I open it up here, hopefully my network connection works. I can pull this up, and I can look at the package one. You can read everything you ever wanted to know about it. And it gives you a couple of examples. and then all of the various attributes so you can set. Some of them are specific to the type of operating system you're on, and so forth. So lots of stuff. The package provider resource type is kind of funky. I mean, there's a lot of things it has to deal with. So the files that I keep talking about are actually in Puppet language called manifests. They have a manifest of the things to do. And so we can write a simple one for users. So we can make a simple one here that we want to do. So I'll literally copy and paste it to make things a little easier. I'm already, see, users pp. I'm going to change my name so that I have a Lance user. Keep this up so you can see it maybe a little bit better than mine. So here I'm going to create a user. I don't set the password, which means by default it should lock the user account, if I remember correctly. So if you try to SSH as the user, it won't let you because it needs to have a password set. It'll put it in the wheel in the Vagrant group, and then it'll set the shell to T-shell. An awesome old-fashioned shell. Yes, awesome. So now I have the user's pp file. And does everybody have that in their little file? Okay. So now we're actually going to apply the manifest. So all we need to do that is type puppet, apply, and then the name of the file. Done. It created a user. And I can check to see if it exists. I can check to see that it actually has, oh, it didn't, so you notice it didn't actually create a home directory. That's because we didn't set the attribute to do that. So we have a user, and it's in the two groups that we told it to, but it doesn't have anything in there. And if you look in the shadow file, you'll see it has 2 exclamation points, which basically mean it's locked. So we've created a user using Puppet, really easy. Any questions so far? Cool. So one thing we also want to have in any kind of configuration management system is that whenever we run Puppet or whatever we're using, that it doesn't keep piling on the same things over and over again. It should understand the state and not have to do any actions on it. So in theory, I should be able to run this again, and it shouldn't do anything. And it did. It didn't have to do anything, which is good. You know, we can keep running this as many times as we want, and it shouldn't change the state unless somebody modifies it. You know, if I could change something and then tell it to run again, it should change it back. So this is a really important feature that you want to understand about configuration management. Each of them do a little bit differently. CF Engine has this promise theory thing where it tries to figure it out. And then Chef does it more in an iterative way. Yes?
Is there anything that prevents you from using both of the same system?
Both 2 different configuration management systems?
Using Puppet and Chef on the same system.
If you don't want to have sanity.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking I'm installing these tools locally, so I mean that's not going to cause any problems, right? If I have them locally.
Doing what?
If I just have them locally to play around with it, that's not going to
No, shouldn't be. No. I mean, there's no problem doing that. It's just, it gets to be an issue if you're trying to manage a system.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm just talking about experimentation.
Yeah, if you just install it, I mean, by default, most of these don't start any kind of service up that if it has it. So it shouldn't run the Puppet anything on it. So it should be fine. It won't do anything. But yeah, in the real world, you really don't want to have 2 configuration management systems running at the same time because unless you know what you're really doing, they can fight each other, which we've had happen where we ran one project where we ran CF Engine and then they kind of wanted to do some stuff in Puppet and then they would change things in Puppet that we were still managing in CF Engine and every hour they would fight back and forth. Like, no, I want it this way. No, I want it this way. No, I want it this way. And like just a never-ending battle.
That's messy.
Very messy. So we can also create a manifest that will install Apache and start it up. Kind of very similar to the example I used last week. So I will cheat a little bit and copy and paste again. Whoops. I don't want the console. Try this again. Oh. It's because I'm hitting C. So here we're being a little lazy and we're not calling it Apache package and Apache service. We're just going to keep it really simple. So we know literally on the system that the package is called HTTPD and that the service is literally called HTTPD. And we have set that we want it to be running and we want it to be enabled. And we can't start the service before we need to have it installed before we can start the service. So let's go ahead and run Puppet apply and see what happens. So there we go. You can see that it installed the package first, and then it set up the service. So if I want to check to see if the service is running, I can say service status HTTPD. Oh, I got to do it in the correct order. It says it's running. If I have fun, I could say stop. In theory, what should this do? If I run it again, if I run Puppet again, I have the service stopped. Started. So let's see if what I say is correct. It changed from stop to running. Say somebody says, I don't like Apache. Okay. The next run of Puppet happens. Back to normal, or back to the state you wanted it in. So, very, very simple. So, where do you think where Puppet keeps all its configuration files at? Hopefully, it's in Etsy. And we won't go into great detail about these config files. That's something at a later date. We don't need to change anything this time, but Puppet conf on the client side, because Puppet's a server client setup. Oh, did you check to see if the feed's actually working? Okay, I wanted to make sure. Puppet needs to know how to bootstrap itself, basically. And it needs to know, hey, my Puppet server is actually here. And maybe I have specific settings with that I need to do. That's what you would have in the Puppet conf. And when you're doing the install of the OS, maybe you have it prepped up with that already. So you kind of have to have some kind of a bootstrapping part. And then you also have some other configuration about authentication. So I should only trust my Puppet configs from this host. I don't want to get arbitrary Puppet commands from a server I don't trust. And then you have other various directories that may have stuff in there as you want. We'll talk about modules later. So just to check my sanity, we'll see. There we go. So in Puppet, everything starts from a single manifest called site.pp. And from there, we'll talk in more detail about how you can kind of organize this. So we've kind of gone away from just having all these individual files. We should probably have Puppet do it in the correct way. So we'll want to put something in the site.pp. And so we'll create this directory because it's not there. And I should mention, like, normally in a regular production environment, you would have a Puppet server that has all the manifests and everything on it, and then the client talks to the server. We're doing things simple, and we're running it in standalone mode. So just keep that in mind. We're not going to really cover the Puppet master stuff and getting that all set up, because it gets to be a little confusing. Because in Puppet, you have to sign a certificate, and then approve it, and then you have to make sure everything's up there. So we're just running everything kind of on a local standardized mode. But before we talk about the site.pp, let's talk about nodes. So in Puppet terminology, a node is basically your machine that you're defining. So maybe on machine foo, I want to have Apache installed, but machine bar, I want to have Nginx installed. So you would have a node defined differently between it. It's like I want to include, I want to do one on this one, one on the other. Usually the node is defined by its FQDN. Hopefully by now you know that means fully qualified DNS name, otherwise known as the full DNS name. So in the case of this host, its fully qualified DNS name is that long, the long version, just so you know. You can define a lot of nodes. You can even use regular expressions if you want to in some of the node definitions. So everything that starts with the foo or whatever gets this definition, although that's not really the best way of doing things. I don't really recommend that. There's also a default node, which if they can't find any definition for the node itself, it uses that. So it's kind of like the default for everything. And for now, we're going to put everything in the default node. So in this case, we're going to manage a couple of things. So we've already done the package, HTTPD, the service, but now we're going to add this thing up there called Etsy issue. Etsy issue is that banner when you log into the machine that displays what you're doing. So if you look here, it says this. If you log into some of the OSL machines, it gives you a really big banner, a big fat warning. So here we're literally saying we want to have this file on that path with that user mode present and literally put this content in it. So here, and we notice we put a new line at the end, otherwise it won't do it. Let's see here. And for sanity's sake, I'm actually going to destroy my Vagrant VM so that I can get it into a known state, because I kind of did a few things manually. The beauty of configuration management is I didn't actually write these slides originally. Ken made it. He's on vacation this week, so I get to do slides for him. So I get to think like him. So while that's booting up, we're going to talk about the master and the client stuff a little bit. I know I said we weren't going to go into too much detail, but we at least need to understand some basics. So when you start the Puppet Master, it needs to read that site PP. It's like the starting of everything, and from there it can kind of pull from other places. So, and then once it does that, it starts up, and then any agent can talk to that and get its configuration. And in Puppet world, if I remember correctly, the Puppet Master will get that request and say, oh, I know what you need to be. I will compile this catalog, as they call it, which is basically the instructions of go do this stuff, like install this in this specific order. This is where differences in configuration management systems differ widely. And CF Engine, that's not the case. It literally copies all your config files onto the system and then it runs it essentially locally. In the case of Chef, it does a similar thing where it pulls some of the things, but then it does all the calculations on the node itself. So that's kind of where things get a little different. In our case, we're going to run the master and the agent on the same system, just for testing. And you normally wouldn't run the Puppet Master this way, but for fun, we're going to do it this way, just to kind of make things go. When you have it running on different machines, that's where you get into an SSL certificate, and things get a little more interesting. But that's good because we don't want Puppet Master, or we don't want Puppet clients talking to Puppet Masters they're not supposed to talk to. Generally, when you start up a new system, you say, hey, I'm connecting to this Puppet Master. You go in the Puppet Master and you say, I trust this, I know this certificate is valid, accept it, and then it goes from there and keeps it in its SSL library. So let me get back to where I was at. And thankfully, I'm not running my VM on my laptop. Okay. So let
Log in at the top.
I think it's still running. Go technology.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't know it was blocked.
The screen?
The Google Hangout.
Oh, you don't even know, like, I've been in the game and fully rebooted my computer and came back onto my operating system and was still in game. I saw my BIOS and I was like, hey guys, I just saw my BIOS and I'm still in game. I guess it's just like the network screen just didn't get the packet disconnected. It was like, did time out and that's back. I mentioned game called Dark Panic. You played Dark Panic? I don't really know what I'm listening to 4 days. But it would be
All right.
Okay.
Now we're back.
Except we're not back on the projector.
Oh, sorry. There we go. So I just created my site PP. I copied and pasted what was in the example. And now I'm going to start the Puppet Master manually. Whoops. Normally you would use the service command and start it that way, but for this, we're going to just do it this way. So this starts a little Puppet Master in the background. And so the agent by default will look for a host called Puppet by itself. And just for sanity's sake, we're going to manually edit our Etsy host file so that we don't have to change anything. And so normally you wouldn't do this, but we're just going to make it really easy. So I'm going to go here in the Etsy hosts. At the very end, I'm just going to put Puppet. This is just a simple hack way of having your system locally know that that's where Puppet is. If you ever wanted to test how to, like I have this site that I'm migrating to, but it's on a different IP, you can munge your own Etsy hosts and point it to that place, which is great until you forget to revert what you did and you can't figure out why you can't connect to something. But that's a nice little hack thing you can kind of do as a DevOps kind of person. So I added it literally there. And now we're going to do a test run of the Puppet agent. So instead of telling it, hey, run this file, it's going to talk to the Puppet Master server, which is running locally, and it's going to do its thing, and it'll actually do it. For fun, we can do it in no-op mode, which means don't do anything, just tell me what you're going to do, which usually works. In this case, it should work. So here it'll show you what it's going to do. So the nice thing about Puppet, it shows you a nice little diff output of things that might change. And since it's in no-op mode, it's saying, you know, should be running, should be doing this, blah, 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 blah.
So what does the test parameter do? That's different from no-op?
I'm trying to remember what it means. Look here. So it's basically, hey, you normally wouldn't do this in production, but it's like, don't cache anything, just do it. Because sometimes you might put a splay in because you don't want all your Puppet clients to run at the same time if you have 10,000 of them.
Yeah.
So there's things like that. So it's like typical, you know, testing type of parameter.
Right.
So I'm gonna, and verbose basically prints out more stuff so you know what's going on. So now I'm actually gonna let it run and let it do its thing. And it installed Apache, and it showed it was running. So it did that all through the simple node site.pp, which is the default one. And it changed the issue to be that. So if we look at the issue, it should say that. If we log in, I think it doesn't, SSH isn't set to use it, so. But yeah, it should show that. Any questions so far? Okay. Oh, I guess I should have checked to make sure my audio is working. Okay, good.
It appears to be working.
Sometimes my laptop likes to start up and say, "Oh, your mic's on mute." So the next thing we're going to talk about is modules. So yeah, you can have everything in one single file, but what if I have to manage, a half dozen different services and packages and things? It doesn't really seem sane to manage it in one single file. We should probably, put it in some kind of a packaged form so that I can move things around. And that's what modules do. Chef has the same concept called cookbooks. So modules basically has a way of, you would make a module for a specific type of a function. So in our case, we're going to make a Apache one. And so we're going to call it, I think, Bootcamp Apache. And so you can define something specific to that, and then you can include it. And then on some systems, maybe there's some optional things in the module that you may want to have on some systems, and you can say, install this. In Puppet world, you can parameterize it. So you can say, we're going to use this default feature that we want to enable, but this time we want to have this thing turned on by default. And when you include it, it will do that. It's just a nice way to kind of to collect things. And in the case we're going to show a little bit later, there's a lot of community managed cookbooks, or modules, I should say. So, for example, there's a really good MySQL Puppet module that we don't need to write how to install and manage MySQL. We'll just use a community one. We can contribute back up to it, the whole open source thing. And then we just read the documentation and use it. So it's great. But it makes it really easy to kind of, I have random app and I need to manage it this way. And the module structure is pretty similar to this. So on the Puppet Master, you would have everything in etc Puppet modules. And then underneath there, you would have module name as the directory. And then there's some other directories underneath there. So the synonymous of the site.pp for the whole Puppet site configuration for modules, it's the init.pp. That's the start of the module initialization. So you can, in theory, put everything in init, but that's probably not what you want to do. A pretty good example of what you might do here is that init is essentially like your main, and then you create a client.pp that only installs the client, maybe MySQL libraries, and a server.pp that sets up the MySQL server. So when you say, you'll see the kind of how we talk about it, but you can say, I want to install MySQL : server, and that'll use that class. And it may pull from other classes inside of it. And then the files directory is for, later I have this file that I want to push out from this module. So instead of how I did the content, I can say, pull from this file from this module. And there's other directories you can do stuff like with templates. You can actually write Ruby libraries to do fun stuff. It can get pretty crazy pretty quickly. So in this case, let's create a module for our Apache configuration. So we're going to go into etc Puppet modules. There's nothing in there. We're going to create a module called Bootcamp _Apache. Notice there's an underscore. If I remember correctly, I don't think Puppet likes dashes in module names. However, I'm pretty sure that you can have dashes in Chef cookbooks. And we're going to create the manifest folder. Somebody just got called to the bridge. Whoops. I can type. And now we're going to create our init file. So, because I'm lazy, I'll just copy and paste. So in this case, we're going to do the same thing we did before, but we're going to also install mod WSGI, which is what we can use to run the system view app we've created. It's a way of running Python applications on Linux. So I save that. So here, we're declaring the name of the module and the class. So it is called Bootcamp _Apache. Any questions so far? Okay. So now we're going to change our site.pp to include this module. So all that code that we put in the site PP, all we need to do now is just say include Bootcamp Apache. That's all we have to do. So if I go up to the top, I can take these out. Should be what we have here. This should do the same thing, except the only thing that should change is install the mod whiskey. So let's try that and see what happens. There we go. And you might notice in Puppet, it changed a little bit what this output looks like. So here it says Bootcamp Apache. That's just using the module name. And it's kind of a way of understanding as the output happens, you can kind of see it kind of going through. So as I mentioned, you know, there's a lot of modules that we may not need to write ourselves, and we can use a community one. But for our system view app, you know, we need MySQL. We need to have a database user permissions. We can probably write our own stuff to do it, but it can get complicated, and why do we want to reinvent the wheel? So we're going to use the one that's actually on Puppet Labs. We're just going to literally pull it from Git and get cloned it in there. Puppet actually has a couple of management tools to kind of do this a little bit better, but for sanity's sake, we're just going to do it this way. So we're going to go in here, and we're going to clone this. Oh, I guess we need to install Git first. So here is our module, and so if you want to see some crazy stuff, we'll go into the site BP, and here we can see a whole bunch of parameters, and then it does a bunch of stuff. I'm not entirely sure. Oh, so it has some kind of compatibility mode, which I don't know what it's doing. But it has a whole bunch of other things. So if like we want to only have the client PP, this will install that. It will then set some things up. It's been a while since I've seen Puppet. This is some newer stuff I haven't seen before. And so there's a lot of stuff in there. And then files literally has some files that it pulls in, templates. So I might look at the MySQL config file. So it uses ERB, which is, what does the E stand for? Can't remember. But basically it's just like any templating language, like we have a system view app and things like that, but it's in Ruby. So we can do the things we want to do. That doesn't seem to be this is a little more complicated than I thought it was going to be. Wow, okay. Anyways, so now we actually have the MySQL module included now. We can actually use it. So we want to, let's make our own MySQL module. We don't have to do it, but this way we can make our own site-specific preferences we want to have. Maybe in this case, we're going to set up the users. So let's run this. Am I going at a good speed? Hopefully I'm not going too fast. Okay. And this is all we're going to do. Just put that in there. And that literally just uses the default settings for the MySQL server. So you're probably wondering, why are we doing this weird : business? If I remember correctly, in Puppet, it's just a way of dealing with the ordering or the precedence of the various classes and modules. So this will install the server in a very basic way. So let's go ahead and, yeah, before we do that, let's go ahead and just run our Puppet manifest and see what happens. Make sure this actually works. There we go. to actually have it running though. Wow. Oh, I don't think I've added it. Ha. Make sure I'm doing this right. Okay. So let's go ahead and we'll use this is all defined. Oh. So if you read up on the documentation of the MySQL module, it'll define all these various types of definitions. So like, what does the MySQL database definition do? In this case, it's creating a database called system view. It's ensuring it's present, and it's setting some characters and some other various database settings. And then we're going to create a MySQL user. We're going to use it saying it should be Vagrant at localhost, and then we're going to grant permissions for that user to that database so that it can do anything we need to do. Any questions about that? Okay. Here we go. So first we need to actually we actually need to include it. Looks like that's a missing step in the documentation. So let's go ahead and run Puppet. Oh, apparently I have an error in my, I must have typoed something. Let's see again. We could say.
So it's looking for Bootcamp MySQL, and we checked it out as just my. Oh, we did check it out as just.
Bootcamp MySQL. What am I doing wrong?
I know that I changed it from Bootcamp MySQL to regular MySQL by modifying the git clone, and I thought I caught every instance, but I did not.
Make sure it does this again. Could not find. They typed manifest right, didn't they?
Looking for a myth in the top level directory?
No.
It was a manifest.
Hooray for live demos.
Yep.
Oh. Should be fine.
If we
Make sure I didn't miss something here. Well, it should work. I guess we'll have to figure out the bugs on this. I must have some kind of a typo in somewhere, and I'm just not seeing it. Could not find it. First it was complaining about, oh, there is a syntax error in there. I don't think I have to do this. Nope. And you got it to run on your end, Emily?
I didn't actually get that far with it, so I had to run off the class.
Ah.
I did not test it as thoroughly as I should have, as I said.
Another thing is, you notice these arrow pointers. Generally, with the styling guidelines, you want to have them lining up vertically. If you haven't noticed that, there's a whole guideline thing on Puppet on how to do that. Whoops. Make sure I'm not missing something here. That's right. I don't think this matters.
When you declare a class, oh yeah, okay, good. Set the class on SQL Server.
I could have sworn that you do this a different way. I swear you do it this way. So I don't know. I'll try it this way. Yeah, I must have been wrong.
Has it been a while since you?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've done
We've
Puppet.
been mainly switching to Chef. The reason we chose Puppet over Chef for this is it's a lot more self-contained and can be demonstrated in a simpler way without having to explain as many moving parts as at first.
Okay.
Wait, when you're doing X and then, is that right quit?
Say what?
What is when you do, you weren't doing right quit, right?
Oh, X means, yeah, right quit.
It's short.
It's a shorthand.
I was like, there has to be. Come on, I'm going to do two keys to something.
Yeah, that's been there since the, yeah.
Oh yeah, I just never, nobody ever mentioned that one. Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of things, yeah.
What else can you do?
This is what we got a lot of someone who knows what they're doing and learn from them.
So you know it was.
Look
I was
at,
thinking the same thing because he's like executing really quick.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
like,
I've always
also, I
done
was
that
looking for
too.
the W key.
Yeah, I've always been like, WQ, there should just be one thing for this. Come on.
oh, I think I know.
Oh, I know about all this. J, I, W. Most I just have it on
Vagrant on laptop.
Damn.
here.
Invalid resource type.
That's what I just said.
Oh, I guess that is the wrong way of doing it. Never fails, read the documentation.
Could we take a look
Yeah, it's
at
kinda cool.
the other package that we have? There's Bootcamp and MySQL, and then there's a Bootcamp. Is it Apache? Bootcamp Apache is.
Oh, you have a question?
If you come to apply, do we get Descriptive error messages go?
Somewhat, yeah. I'm wondering if I do need to actually use the correct name. I don't think this matters, but let's give it a shot. Because I did put that in there because I thought that. So that was the problem. Haha. So apparently I do have a syntax error. So yeah, I think there's missing this. Because they're doing it in shorthand. Oh, maybe I'm missing. There's that. Doing something silly somewhere.
Is that the correct syntax for subclasses?
This?
I think that's the only place that we like import a class or whatever. Over in the Apache version, it was required the other package.
I think they've changed that syntax.
Yeah, because in the Bootcamp Apache class, we say required our package with HTTP and all that.
Anyways,
Yeah.
I'll turn off the recording and we can kind of figure this out. Do you guys have any other questions?
Have you used Ansible at all?
I have personally not used Ansible much.
I started using it like 5-6 months ago, and Dart keeps making fun of me for it.
So the thing I seem to understand is that like the reason why that's really the one that seems attractive to me to use, especially Ansible, as opposed to the other two, is that as I understand you don't have a server.
Yeah.
It just runs on it.
It's simple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it's just like it's kind of just like Python and Git and all these other tools. They kind of use inherent properties of the machine to reinvent things good.
Yeah, that's why I started using it where I work, because there's just 6 programmers where I work.
Oh, okay. Where do you work at?
LCGS Spatial downtown for us.
Nice.
But yeah, we just, like 6 months ago, I was talking to Justin. Do you know Justin?
Is that Mungwin?
Justin Duggar, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I was talking to him about, this sort of stuff, setting up this web application we were working with and mobile application.